Kamala Harris should be impeached. I'll explain in just a moment. First, the wait is almost over. On October 28th, Matt Walsh's hit comedy Am I Racist is finally coming home to Daily Wire Plus. That is correct. The #1 documentary of the decade will be available for streaming exclusively at Daily Wire Plus. If you're not a Daily Wire Plus member, you need to go to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code DEI for 35% off new annual memberships right now. Okay, so when I say that Kamala Harris should be impeached, and there are a bunch of reasons why, theoretically, she could be impeached. So, for example, the fact that she has not yet invoked the 25th Amendment to get rid of her boss after defenestrating him from his nomination, that would be a pretty good-sized abdication of her constitutional duty. See, the Constitution suggests that the vice president is chiefly responsible for getting rid of the president if the president is no longer compos mentis, if his brain no longer functions. That clearly has been the case for Joe Biden for a long while. So clearly has that been the case that Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party pushed him off the back of a train to get him out of the nomination position. But they left him in office, which means that she has abdicated her duty. But there's something more specific that I'm talking about today. So I want to go all the way back in the time machine to 2019. You remember that Donald Trump was impeached twice. The first time, he was actually not impeached over January 6th. He was impeached over Ukraine. So there was a phone call that he held with Vladimir Zelensky in which he allegedly threatened Vladimir Zelensky with withdrawal of American military aid if Vladimir Zelensky did not cause prosecutors in Ukraine to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden's relationship with Burisma, a natural gas company in Ukraine that Hunter Biden was on the board of. And this was considered an impeachable offense. The basic idea for those who voted in favor of impeachment is that the president of the United States could not use foreign policy as a way of manufacturing election-related topics. You could not try to swivel an American election based on withholding aid from an American ally. In fact, here is how the impeachment charges against Trump ran in 2019. As you recall, he was in fact impeached in the House, and then, of course, he was acquitted in the Senate. So in 2019, here is how those Trump impeachment charges ran. Quote, using the powers of his high office, President Trump solicited the interference of a foreign government, Ukraine, in the 2020 United States presidential election. He did so through a scheme or course of conduct that included soliciting the government of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations that would benefit his reelection, harm the election prospects of a political opponent, and influence the 2020 U.S. presidential election to his advantage. President Trump also sought to pressure the government of Ukraine to take these steps by conditioning official U.S. government acts of significant value to Ukraine on its public announcement of the investigations. Okay, so just to get it straight, what the charge was when it was brought against Trump in 2019 is that Donald Trump had made the government of Ukraine do a thing beneficial to his reelect effort. And in order to do that, he had threatened to withdraw their aid. Now, fast forward to 2024. Israel is currently engaged in a war in the Gaza Strip. That war is with Hamas, a terror group that, as you will recall, a little more than a year ago on October 7th, 2023, invaded Israel, killed 1,200 people, took 250 hostages back into the terror tunnels in the Gaza Strip. And ever since then, the Biden administration has been, shall we say, reticent to simply push for Israeli victory. I mean, the Biden administration foreign policy on its own terms makes no sense. Their foreign policy in Ukraine, where Ukraine is currently fighting a defensive war where they are not going to achieve total victory. They're not going to take back the Donbass region. They are not going to take back Crimea. The Biden administration foreign policy has been total victory for Ukraine. Whatever Zelensky wants, Zelensky gets. And then when it comes to Israel, which does have dominant military power in the region, then it's, man, we really wish Israel would de-escalate. This de-escalation needs to start right now. I mean, enough of this. Imagine for a second if the Biden administration had reversed those positions. And when it came to Ukraine, they said, we are going to provide the amount of aid necessary in order for you to protect your borders, and we're going to push for an off-ramp. And when it came to Israel, they had said, you get what you need in order to destroy your enemies, and we will stand back and watch with glee as you take out Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the Iranian proxy groups. A very different world right now. That would look like a foreign policy that makes some sort of sense. In fact, that is something that the Biden administration should be doing right now. Yesterday, I had a conversation with the father of an American hostage. The hostage's name is Idan Alexander. He's being held in the Gaza Strip by Hamas ever since October 7th. And he suggested quite rightly that if the Biden administration had any brains at all, or really any spine, what they would be doing right now is they would be saying to Iran, we will let Israel completely off the chain to destroy your nuclear facilities unless you get Hamas to release the hostages. And tomorrow the hostages would be out. He's totally right about that, by the way. Instead, here's what is going on. And here's where the impeachable stuff comes in. The Biden administration is putting open pressure right now on the state of Israel to let in aid to the Gaza Strip. Now, do I think that this is really about aid for the Gaza Strip? I do not. The reason I do not think that this is about aid for the Gaza Strip is because it is well known that Hamas is stealing about 50% of all aid that is going into the Gaza Strip at this point. According to the New York Post, Hamas terrorists were captured on video taking control of 47 of 100 aid trucks entering the Gaza Strip on Tuesday alone. Channel 12's Almag Boker reported, quote, "It is no secret that Hamas takes control of humanitarian aid. We've already published here tapes of Hamas in which you can hear them saying themselves they have no more room in their own warehouses. But this evening, we also bring special documentation of what it looks like from inside with cameras that are tracking it in real time." Where is the aid supposed to be dropped off? Well, it's supposed to be dropped with members of the UNRWA, which is a Hamas front group. So yesterday, the Biden administration warned Israel that they would withdraw military aid if Israel did not facilitate large-scale entry of humanitarian aid into the northern Gaza Strip. In a letter to senior Israeli officials, according to the Wall Street Journal, dated October 13th and signed by Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the U.S. blamed Israel for a drastic drop in humanitarian aid into Gaza that contributed to starvation and widespread suffering, particularly in the enclave's north, where Israel launched a renewed ground operation nearly 2 weeks ago. The top American officials gave Israel 30 days to, quote, reverse the downward humanitarian trajectory, or else it may have implications for future weapons transfers and funding under U.S. law. Blinken and Austin specifically cite a part of Foreign Assistance Act that bars the U.S. from providing security aid to any nation that, quote, prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport or delivery of U.S. humanitarian assistance. The State Department spokesperson, Matthew Miller, said Tuesday, "We have seen Israel make changes before. When they make changes, humanitarian assistance can increase." Now, here is the reason I'm skeptical that the threat to withdraw aid is about the humanitarian assistance in the northern Gaza Strip. Reason number one, Israel has been shipping in enormous sums of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip for months at this point. We were talking about basically 2,500 calories per person per day in the Gaza Strip for months on end into an area where the civilians are still largely aligned with Hamas and where Israeli hostages are still being held captives, including multiple Americans. So do I think that this is about the humanitarian assistance? No, I do not. I actually think what this is, it is an excuse. They're looking for a legal excuse to embargo Israel in order to threaten Israel not to do anything too big with Iran. Why? And here's where the other half of the story comes in. Here's where the impeachable stuff comes in. So just yesterday, the Washington Post reported that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, had told Israel that Israel will strike Iranian military, not nuclear or oil targets. Buried in this Washington Post article is a bit of a revelation. According to the Washington Post, the White House had no immediate comment. The Israeli Prime Minister's office said in a statement, quote, "We listen to the opinions of the United States, but we will make our final decisions based on our national interests." However, according to the Washington Post, quote, "The retaliatory action would be calibrated to avoid the perception of political interference in the U.S. elections," the official familiar with the matter said, signaling Netanyahu's understanding the scope of the Israeli strike has the potential to reshape the presidential race. Let's just make very clear what is happening right now. That admission right there, that this is about the U.S. presidential race, that there's pressure being put on the Israeli government not to retaliate against Iran, which fired 181 ballistic missiles into Israel, that pressure not to go too hard is being driven by electoral concerns, and that humanitarian aid, that war aid to Israel is being withdrawn or threatened to be withdrawn by the U.S. government in order to get Israel to do less with Iran in advance of the election. You know what that looks an awful lot like? That looks an awful lot like electioneering with foreign aid. That looks an awful lot like what Democrats impeached Donald Trump for in 2019. That's what that sounds like. It sounds as though you put those two pieces of the puzzle together. Piece number one, the United States openly threatening withdrawal of military aid to Israel, supposedly based on humanitarian assistance concerns, which is clearly not the case. And two, the story that says that Israel is going to hold back the full brunt of an attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities in order to facilitate, that's what that means, to facilitate the election efforts of Kamala Harris. And that is the 2019 impeachment case in a nutshell. That is, in fact, remember, Kamala Harris is part of these phone calls. She's been on every phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu for weeks. She's in the room. We have pictures of her in the room. So she and her campaign are saying to Netanyahu, don't go too hard on Iran. And simultaneously, the Secretary of State is saying, and by the way, you should just know your military aid might get put on hold. That sounds an awful lot like that 2019 impeachment charge against Donald Trump. But I guess it's fine, so long as it's a Democrat, which is, of course, the case. The media have no interest in whether or not foreign aid provisions are being violated, so long as we're not talking about Ukraine and Donald Trump, apparently. And meanwhile, the continued freakout is, in fact, maintaining for Kamala Harris. There's some national polling numbers that have come out over the course of the last 24 hours that are fairly good for Kamala Harris. The problem for her, of course, is that this election is not going to come down to national numbers. This election is going to come down to the state numbers. There are a couple new national polls, one from Marist that has Harris up 5, one from Marquette that has them in a tie. But in the state polling, Donald Trump has made some fairly significant gains. Here are the last state polling numbers from Michigan. Trump +2, +2, +1, -2, +4, tie +2, +1. Those are all the latest polls from Michigan. Check out Pennsylvania. Trump +3, +1, -2, +2, +1, +1, -3, +3. Now, again, there's no way to tell. One of these polls could be right. All the rest could be wrong. But in the majority of the polls in these swing states, Donald Trump is currently winning. That is a problem, obviously, for Kamala Harris, and she's lagging with particular crowds. She's obviously lagging with Pennsylvania Catholics, for example. It was very weird back in the debate that she did with Donald Trump. There was one point where she started citing Donald Trump and NATO as a reason for Pennsylvania's Polish population to vote for her, as though Donald Trump and his talk about making members of NATO pay their fair share, as though that was going to get Pennsylvania Polish constituents out to the polls. That, of course, is silly. That is cutting directly against another problem. Polls tend to be Catholic. Pennsylvania polls tend to be Catholics. Kamala Harris has a huge problem with Catholics, but you know what's a big problem for you? Going online without actually protecting your online activity. It's like leaving your door unlocked when you leave your house. Maybe you trust some of your neighbors, but then there's that creepy guy down the block who sees you leave your house and goes inside and starts taking all your stuff. With ExpressVPN, you can stay safe online without having to trust any random stranger. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in a cafe, hotel, or airport, you're basically inviting hackers to steal your information. Trust me, it doesn't take a tech genius to do it. Even a 12-year-old with some cheap hardware could potentially access your passwords, bank logins, and credit card details. Your data is seriously valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal information on the dark web. That's why I never go online without ExpressVPN. It creates an encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet, making it virtually impossible for hackers to steal your data. We're talking billion-year level encryption here. ExpressVPN is incredibly easy to use. Just open the app, click one button, and you're now protected. It works on all your devices too. Phones, laptops, tablets, so you can stay secure whether you're owning the libs on Twitter or watching PragerU videos. Do not let the radical left, big tech, or hackers get their hands on your personal data. Secure your online data today. Visit expressvpn.com/Ben. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. Get 3 extra months free with my exclusive link. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. Also, every single year when Apple releases that new iPhone, the big carriers, they play the same old games. Sign your life away for the next couple years. Get a free iPhone. You don't have to fall for this. With Pure Talk, you can get great savings on the new iPhone 16, and you can still get an affordable data plan that fits your needs on America's most dependable 5G network. How would I know? Well, because I have that new iPhone 16 from Pure Talk. Here's the bottom line, folks. Stop falling into the same traps. Stop overpaying for data you're not going to use. With Pure Talk, for just $35 a month, get unlimited talk, text, and 15 gigs of data, plus mobile hotspot on America's most dependable 5G network. But wait, it gets even better. When you switch to Pure Talk on a qualifying plan, you'll get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus Insider. That means access to our full library of movies, series, and documentaries. Listen up, folks. Mark your calendars for October 28th. That's when you get exclusive access to Matt Walsh's latest bombshell documentary, Am I Racist? Trust me, the left have been squirming about that one for a while. It's the biggest documentary of the last decade. That's not all. You're getting uncensored, ad-free daily shows, a full year of our kids' platform, Bentkey, your very own leftist tears Tumblr. The only way you can get this special offer is by going to puretalk.com/Shapiro or call and mention my name. Stop overpaying for your cell phone plan. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro today, switch to a qualifying plan, get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus Insider. As William McGurn writes in the Wall Street Journal today, it's not just gaffes that could hurt the vice president in the Keystone State. Throughout her career as a public official, Kamala Harris has long used government power to try to coerce people of faith to violate their consciences, especially regarding abortion and gender ideology, according to Kristen Wagner, CEO of Alliance Defending Freedom, which protects religious liberty. As California's AG, she signed several friend of the court briefs opposing religious exemptions for private employers like Hobby Lobby and religious nonprofits like Little Sisters of the Poor. She said she was proud to have co-sponsored California's Reproductive Fact Act, which compelled pro-life pregnancy centers to display notices about where women could get an abortion. And then, of course, you'll recall that there was one point where she grilled a judicial nominee named Brian Busher about his membership in the Knights of Columbus, suggesting that the Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic men's fraternal organization, is effectively some sort of KKK-like organization. She's got real problems with the religious people. And that is not letting up, given the fact that you now have people like Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, doing lesbian knockoffs of communion with author and influencer Liz Plank. On Friday, the Michigan Catholic Conference, the church's lobbying arm in the state, published a statement to express profound disappointment and offense taken at the actions in the video. Now, again, these are big boo-boos that are happening from the Kamala Harris campaign over and over and over. And of course, she is now being relegated to pitching for black men, which is a very weird thing for a black candidate for higher office to have to do in the United States 2.5 weeks from an election. If Kamala Harris is relegated to defending her ground with black men in the United States 2.5 weeks from an election, that is bad news for her. And again, the way that she's doing that is truly paternalistic and ridiculous. And if a white person did it, would be perceived pretty obviously as racist. She's basically saying to black men, I'm going to throw money and at you. Those are her proposals. She wants $20,000 in forgivable government loans for 1 million minorities to start businesses. Virtually all of those, of course, will immediately be forgiven. And she's directing them at minorities, which means that it's unconstitutional. This is not the first time that Democrats have tried to do this. In March 2021, they pushed a loan forgiveness program in the March 2021 COVID bill for socially disadvantaged farmers who are defined as those who are Black, American Indian, Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Islander. Several judges enjoined the program. Also, she says she wants to legalize pot. So the lady who's famous for locking people up for pot in California is so famous that Tulsi Gabbard wrecked her on a debate stage over it. Now, she says she wants to legalize and help minorities get into the drug business. Very exciting stuff. Now, again, she has shifted her position pretty wildly on pot. Again, when she was AG, she was prosecuting it like nobody's business. In 2019, she said it should be legalized because it gives a lot of people joy. So the kind of joy that we should mention that Kamala Harris is about is spending your money and marijuana. Man, this is not a good campaign. It just is not. And so now, as we've been saying for a while, they've been forced into desperation plays. Their latest desperation play, and it's being pushed by Matt Drudge over at Drudge Report. So Matt Drudge has basically become a stenographer and chief narrative advisor for the Democratic Party at this point. Not sure what happened to Matt. There's a point when Drudge Report was quite interesting. It's always very well done and well organized, but he has become a full-time cheerleader for Kamala Harris. Not sure what Donald Trump did to piss him off, but he's the one who's driving the Democratic narrative every day. Today, the headline over Drudge Report is a picture of Trump, and it just says American Psycho. And it is a link to Matt Labish's column in which he labels Trump as such. Again, the narrative that they're trying to build now is that Trump is crazy. Okay, if you're relegated to Trump is crazy, you're toast. I'm sorry. That is not a dog that is going to hunt in this. Everyone who thinks Trump is crazy is already voting against him. There are zero moderates in the country who are thinking about voting for Trump, who are willing to buy that Trump is just so full-scale insane he can't be president. Again, so we have already established a baseline of people in the United States who believe that Donald Trump, under no circumstances, can be president of the United States. That baseline is somewhere between 46 and 48%. That's what Kamala Harris's voting base is right now. It is all people who say that there is a barrier to entry for Donald Trump getting in, and that he has the character that is unfit to be president of the United States. That argument's been made 1 million times. And guess what? It is not going to get Kamala Harris over the hump. If she's having to go back to arguments that appeal chiefly to people who are already voting for her, that's a real problem. So, for example, the Kamala Harris campaign tried to retail a lie that Donald Trump froze on stage the other day. They're basically trying with Trump a strategy that Republicans successfully used on Joe Biden. It worked with Joe Biden because it was true of Joe Biden, and the media covered up Joe Biden's senility for 3.5 years. It is not going to work with Donald Trump. So there's an attempt to turn Donald Trump into a febrile asylum escapee. Okay, I spent time personally with Donald Trump last week. Right? We were in New York together. He came on the show. Donald Trump is not senile like Joe Biden is senile. Donald Trump is not insane. Donald Trump is not failing mentally. This attempt to turn Donald Trump of October 16th, 2024 into Joe Biden of July 2024 is ridiculous. Even ABC News is like, this is not going to play. There was an attempt by the Kamala online team to say that Trump froze up during a rally. Even ABC News was like, this is not true.
But then, 30 minutes in, 2 attendees suffered medical emergencies.
A doctor, please. Doctor.
The incidents shifted the mood, prompting Trump to cut the question short and instead play some of his favorite music.
How about this? We'll play YMCA and we'll go home.
Trump kept DJing, and most of his supporters stayed for another 30 minutes of his playlist. Well, in certain quarters of social media, people had a field day with that, and I guess on the screens it might have looked quite strange. Inside that hall, however, people were having a good time. What can I tell you? It did not seem out of the ordinary. It seemed almost intimate, and at the end, Trump did something he very rarely does. He came down off the stage and mingled with his supporters. He was signing autographs and shaking hands and the like.
Okay, so the left tried to play that as Donald Trump being insane. Instead, it was Donald Trump just being Donald Trump. Trump, by the way, is having a good time on the campaign trail. Kamala Harris is not. A good indicator of who's winning in a race is who's actually having fun on the campaign trail. Well, the fact that Donald Trump seems to have the momentum in this race is a very good thing for the world. That's particularly true in the Middle East, where Israel is still fighting an ongoing war against multiple terrorist groups. October 7th marked the one-year anniversary of the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. 1,200 Israelis were murdered. Over 250 were taken hostage. The war in Israel continues to rage on today. Missiles are flying. Tensions are high. Our allies are under attack. It seems like every time you turn on the news, there's another crisis unfolding in the region. Israel and its people are facing attacks from enemies on all sides who want its destruction. But there's hope. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground, providing food, shelter, and safety to those in need during this crisis. Since the war started, thousands of reservists, everyday Israeli citizens, have left their families to serve their country. Soldiers have been injured. Their families need our support. Their gift of $45 today helps the fellowship provide food and other necessities to these families to help them survive. Here's what I need you to do right now. Go to benforthefellowship.org. That's benforthefellowship.org to make a gift today. In the face of these many threats, the fellowship's ongoing work providing security to Israelis has never been more important. Remember, that's benforthefellowship.org. I know people on the ground who've been helped by the fellowship. Go check them out right now. benforthefellowship.org. God bless and thank you. Also, dudes, have you heard of Rosparks? This dual-action prescription merges the powerhouse ingredients found in generic Viagra and Cialis, sildenafil and tadalafil into one formidable treatment. But it's not merely about what's inside them, it's about their mode of delivery. Rosparks leverages the benefits of sublingual administration, meaning the tablet dissolves under your tongue. This method allows for fast absorption directly into the bloodstream, bypassing the digestive system. The result? Quicker onset of action, reducing the wait time typically associated with traditional pills. Moreover, tadalafil stays in your system for up to 36 hours. Find out if prescription Rosparks is right for you. Get $15 off your first order and connect with the provider at ro.co/Ben. That's $15 off at ro.co/Ben. That's ro.co/Ben. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Only available if prescribed after an online consultation with a provider. That's ro.co/Ben. However, is this stopping people, like, for example, David Chalian, from claiming that Donald Trump is demented, that he has dementia because he's dancing? Is David Chalian the political director at CNN?
Let's be clear. That's not normal behavior for a candidate, right? Like, we've not seen that. And I think you can find people that have covered Donald Trump, like have gone to more than 100 Donald Trump rallies. They've never seen that. So we should just separate that out, that, here we are 3 weeks out from an election, and he's doing something that he's never done before, and that is clearly different than what presidential candidates normally do. What's going on with Donald Trump that he is feeling himself differently in public, or canceling interviews, or he is,
which he did today?
Yeah, exactly. So he is not
Okay.
Well, no, we don't know that, but he is not sort of following some programmatic script here, right? He seems to be having some different sensibility about what it is he wants to do. It reminds me when he was talking about how he does the weave when he's so incoherent, and he comes up with a name to sort of label what that is when he's totally incoherent. And I just think that, again, I don't know. We have no idea if he's okay or not because he doesn't release his medical records.
Yeah, right. I don't think he's okay.
I don't think he's okay. So this is where they're going. They're going to Donald Trump is not okay. Donald Trump is exactly the same as he was 10 years ago. He is. You can see it on stage. You can see it when he talks. He's a little slower because he's now closer to 80 than he is to 70. But I'm sorry, him doing like this little impromptu dance party, if that's the best you got, which is that Donald Trump is a... Also, there are two mutually exclusive arguments that are being made right now. One is that Donald Trump is a deep Hitlerian threat to the Republic, which requires, a little bit of mental aptitude. And the other is Donald Trump has completely lost his mind and he's dancing around on stage to YMCA. And so clearly he can't be president. You got to pick one of these arguments. You can't have both of them. The best expositor of the Donald Trump has dementia argument is former Democratic Congressman from New York, Max Rose, who's openly claiming now that Donald Trump has dementia. By the way, again, it is very funny that the entire Democratic Party is now trying to make the case that Donald Trump has dementia when the current president of the United States that you are leaving in place as president of the United States clearly has dementia. This is crazy towns. Here's Max Rose doing his shtick.
You have to be demented to stand on stage and start dancing when it's a town hall. I mean, we have two sides of Donald Trump right now. One, we have just this grave threat to all that we hold dear, our Constitution, our democracy. On the same hand, I would say the principal driving force of his incompetency is the fact that he is not all there. He's a couple fries short of a Happy Meal at this point, and that's why he's standing up there dancing to the YMCA. Can barely do the YMCA if you actually check out the video. And so this is a story in a video. You don't even actually have to listen to his words. And it's just imperative at this point that the campaign pushes those two separate narratives. Grave threat and also just supremely incompetent and entering the final stages of his life. You know, I feel bad for his family right now. I know so many people have to deal with their parents as they've gone through stages of dementia, and that's clearly what they are on the precipice of having to deal with now. But he certainly should go nowhere near the Oval Office.
Okay, you can't make both those arguments at once. You can't make the argument that he is senile. He's so crazy. He's just out of it all day long. Also, he's Hitler. That argument does not hunt. And also, the current president of the United States, who you are bringing out on the campaign trail, is actually suffering from dementia, and every single human being on earth knows it, including the Democrats. Here was Joe Biden stumping for Kamala Harris yesterday. At the same time, they're trying to make the claim that Donald Trump has lost it. They're trotting out Joe Biden as though everything is totally normal, even though they legitimately took away his nomination and gave it to a lady who had earned 0 votes ever in a primary. You want to talk about demented? This is demented.
She beat Trump so badly in the debate, he's scared to death to beat her again. That's a fact. Tough guy, right? Tough guy.
That's a fact, Jack. She beat him so bad, he's scared to beat her again. I don't even know who was that. Yes, guys, tell me more about dementia and how you identify it. Please, Dr. Rose, explain to me how you get from Donald Trump dancing on stage at a rally with a bunch of his supporters, that's demented. But then Joe Biden is totally fine, and you should leave him as president. Amazing, amazing stuff. As we say, Kamala Harris is having to go to some risky places and to some less risky places. So she is going to do Bret Baier's show tonight. It'll be fascinating to see what happens when she's asked some actual tough questions and the network that airs it doesn't decide to cut her and prevent her from speaking in her mangled, circuitous sentences. She also is going on some friendlies. So she went on Charlemagne the God yesterday. And Charlemagne the God, whose actual real name is Leonard, by the way. I should just point that out because, you know, anytime you title yourself Charlemagne the God, I feel like we should have to mention your actual real name. Anytime you compare yourself to God or a God, I feel like it's an obligation to give your birth name as well. In any case, Charlemagne the God had on Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris had many things to say, all of them pandering. At one point, she suggested that she would look into racial reparations. Remember, folks, she's a moderate. Here we go.
So to your point, yes, I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position.
Okay, so how are you feeling about racial reparations, America? You got $35 trillion in national debt. There's legitimately no way to actually enact racial reparations. There's no way even to separate out the strains of what has been caused in terms of disparity by, for example, slavery, which ended in the United States in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, effectively. There's no way to I mean, I've checked a calendar. That's 160 years ago. How exactly are you going to separate even the strains of Jim Crow out? That ended in 1965, which is now 60 years ago. How are you going to separate that out from the disparities that currently exist in terms of, say, wealth and income earnings? How are you going to do that? She has no plan for that. It's all just pandering nonsense, but it's radical and racial pandering nonsense. She then adds that, you know, if you doubt me, I've always been in favor of these sort of racial giveaways.
What would you say to the people that would consider the timing of this proposal as political timing? And how would you speak to the sentiment that support for black men is only sought out during election cycles and feels that building trust requires consistent engagement and genuine investment into the community outside of election periods? And political benefits for politicians, and may view that some people in the Democrat Party use Black Americans to play identity politics?
So first of all, thank you for your question and for being here. I've been in this race about 70 days. You can look at all my work before those 70 days to know that this, what I'm talking about right now, is not new and is not for the sake of winning this election.
Wait, you were always calling for $20,000 giveaways to Black business owners as well as legalizing them for the sake of Black men? That's weird, because I remember a whole part of your career where none of that was true. But if, as she says, her values have never changed, then you should probably take her at her word when it comes to things like racial separatism and racial giveaways. Meanwhile, Kamala is making the point, she's actually, a caller called in to Charlemagne at the God and suggested that Donald Trump might put minorities in jail, just like randomly jail people based on skin color. Here is Kamala Harris, who's most famous for locking up a lot of Black men in California, actually as AG.
Could you please respond to Trump's claim that he's going to use the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to round up immigrants if he wins the election? This law was last used to put Asian Americans in internment camps during World War II, and I have a sneaking suspicion that if Trump wins, he's going to use this law to put anyone that doesn't look white in camps, and I'm scared.
Yeah, so you've hit on a really important point and expressed it, I think, so well, which is he is achieving his intended effect to make you scared. He is running full time on a campaign that is about instilling fear, not about hope, not about optimism, not about the future, but about fear. And so this is yet another example.
Folks, he's about instilling fear. Also, if you're not white in the United States, he might lock you up in an internment camp. Don't worry, he's the one running on fear, says Kamala Harris. She also spent some time denying that she and Joe Biden were in any way responsible for opening the border wide in the United States. Anywhere from 6.5 million to 11 million illegal immigrants have entered the United States since Kamala Harris took office as vice president.
But doesn't the Biden administration have to take some blame for the border, though? A lot of the blame? Because, I mean, the first 3 years, y'all did get a lot of things wrong with the border.
No, Charlemagne, within hours of being inaugurated, the first bill we passed before we did the Inflation Reduction Act, before we did the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, before we did the Safer Communities Act to deal with gun violence, first thing we dropped was a bill to fix the broken immigration system.
Actually, that bill basically just amnestied everybody in the country illegally. So again, she's out there, she's pandering, she's doing the routine. Is it having any real impact? It is hard to see that in the states that matter. And that presumably is why she's doing Bret Baier tonight. That's it. She's making desperation moves now. When she talks about going on Joe Rogan, or when she talks about doing Bret Baier on Fox News, what she is basically saying is, I don't have the votes in my pocket that I need. She's not taking risk for the sake of taking risk. She's the most risk-averse politician in modern American history. This is a lady who hid from every media question for 6 weeks. We had a running calendar on this show of her not being asked any single serious question. The reason that she is now exposing herself to opposing fire is because she knows that she's in trouble in this election. Well, Kamala Harris apparently believes that it's crucial in the late stages of this election cycle to reach out to Black men. That is a bad sign for her. But let's talk about something crucial for you, sleep. You know, the thing you're probably not getting enough of because you're up all night worrying about the state of the world. Well, I have a solution for you. It is called Helix. Now, I don't endorse products lightly. Helix has changed my life. They've got a whole lineup of different mattresses, 20 different options to be exact. You got the Luxe, for those of you who like to feel like you're sleeping on a cloud. The Elite, for when you want to take your sleep game to the next level. Even the Helix Plus, for our friends who need a little extra support. You don't need a degree in mattressology to figure out which one is right for you. You just take their sleep quiz. I took it myself. They matched me with a medium firm mattress, which is great, since I get back pain if the mattress is too soft. And get this, Helix delivers your personalized sleep solution right to your door. No hassle, no fuss, just pure comfort shipped straight to you. Plus, they're so confident in their product, they give you 100 nights to try it out. If that wasn't enough, there's a 10 to 15-year warranty. Talk about standing behind your product. So if you want to sleep like a baby, the way I do, head on over to helixsleep.com/Ben. Take that sleep quiz. Plus, Helix is offering up to 20% off all mattress orders. Just go to helixsleep.com/Ben. That's helixsleep.com/Ben. With Helix, better sleep starts right now. Also, the moment you've been waiting for is almost here. On October 28th, Matt Walsh's hit comedy, Am I Racist?, is coming home to Daily Wire Plus. When it hit theaters this September, it immediately became the number one new comedy in America. It is now officially the number one documentary of the last decade. That is worth repeating to really irritate our friends on the left. Am I Racist is the number one documentary of the decade. Plus, it's verified hot on Rotten Tomatoes with a 97% audience score. Now, Matt's personal journey through the weird wasteland of woke insanity is coming exclusively to Daily Wire Plus October 28th. Your couch is your front row seat to witness Matt going undercover to hilariously dismantle DEI. But Daily Wire Plus is the only place you can stream Am I Racist at home. It all starts October 28th. If you're not yet a Daily Wire Plus member, what are you waiting for? Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Use code DEI for 35% off new annual memberships right now. Your membership also gets you instant access to the cultural phenomenon, What is a Woman? I think the best documentary of the last 2 decades that is streaming right now. You'll be the first to watch Am I Racist at home, streaming October 28th only at Daily Wire Plus. Now, before we get to the Trump versus the Harris campaign on the economy, there is a rather large piece of breaking news. Okay, so you've been told by the legacy media that crime is down, right? The FBI, they say the crime is down. And a lot of people across the country are going, whoa, hold up a second. If crime is down, why did somebody break into my car last week? And, anecdotal evidence is not actual statistical evidence. What happened to you in your life may not be representative of what happened to the rest of Americans. Well, now it turns out it kind of is representative of what happened to the rest of Americans. According to John Lott, writing for Real Clear Investigations, when the FBI originally released the final crime data for 2022 in September 2023, it reported that the nation's violent crime rate fell by 2.1%. This quickly became and remains a Democratic talking point to counter Donald Trump's claims of soaring crime. But the FBI has quietly revised those numbers, releasing new data that shows violent crime increased in 2022 by 4.5%. The new data includes thousands more murders, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assaults. The Bureau has made no mention of these revisions in its September 2024 press release. The RCI discovered the change through a cryptic reference on the FBI website that states, quote, the 2022 violent crime rate has been updated for inclusion in CIUS 2023. But there's no mention the numbers increased. One only sees the change by downloading the FBI's new crime data and comparing it to the file released last year. After the FBI released that new crime data in September, a USA Today headline read, violent crime dropped for third straight year in 2023, including murder and rape. It's been over 3 weeks since the FBI released the revised data. The Bureau's lack of acknowledgement or explanation about the significant change should concern researchers. I've checked the data on total violent crime from 2004 to 2022, says Carl Moody, professor at the College of William and Mary. There were no revisions from 2004 to 2015. From 2016 to 2020, there were small changes of less than 1 percentage point. The huge changes in 2021 and 2022, especially without an explanation, make it hard to trust the FBI data. The FBI did not respond to RCI's repeated requests for comment. The actual changes in crimes are extensive. The updated data for 2022 report there were 80,000 more violent crimes than in 2021. There were an additional 1,699 murders, 7,780 rapes, 33,459 robberies, and 37,091 aggravated assaults. So how exactly are you supposed to believe their 2023 numbers when they were lying about their 2022 numbers by leaps and bounds? Without that increase, the drop in violent crime in 2023 would have been less than half as large, only 1.6%, instead of the reported drop of 3.5%. Also, the FBI crime data relies on reported crimes. Most crimes go unreported, with only about 45% of violent crimes and 30% of property crimes brought to the police's attention. Since the FBI only tracks reported incidents and the gap is so large, researchers argue that when the media discuss crime rates based on FBI data, they should clarify it reflects reported crime, not give the impression that total crime is changing. So it turns out that the FBI basically buried its numbers and then didn't change the public facing of the numbers. Okay, that's wild. That is wild. So violent crime increased in 2022 by 4.5% after suggesting, the FBI did, that it had fallen by 2.1%. That is a spread of 6.6%. What? So once more, you want to undermine trust in our institutions. This is an amazing way to do that, for sure. And it is totally incredible because, again, the Biden-Harris administration has been reliant on those FBI statistics to proclaim that despite their soft on crime policies, despite seeking consent decrees with every police department in the country and hampering the police's ability to do their job, that crime somehow has been plummeting. All this is part and parcel of a bad left-wing take on crime in which the disconnect between the people who cover crime or the people who deal with crime and the victims of the crime is extraordinary. So, for example, amazing clip on CNN last night. So last night, Ryan Godersky, who does a wonderful job, he was on CNN and he was talking about violent crime in the United States. And he mentioned the so-called Ferguson effect. That is a term that was coined by Heather McDonald in the aftermath of the 2014 justifiable killing of Michael Brown, which half the Democratic Party, including Kamala Harris, declared effectively an extrajudicial murder by an officer. The effect of Ferguson and the Michael Brown shooting was that cops stopped doing their job. Cops across the country stopped policing. You need a proactive police force to actually intervene to stop crime. You need them doing things like stop and frisk in high crime areas. You need the police ready to engage with suspects. And instead, after Ferguson, because of the possibility that if you do your job, you're going to be dragged through a raging mob in media, many officers were like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And so the crime rates skyrocketed. The murder rate skyrocketed. Ryan Godersky mentions this on CNN, and the entire CNN panel seems bewildered by this reality, despite the fact there was a massive increase in crime. You had a continuous drop in crime in the United States from 1994 all the way through 2014, and then it dramatically reversed itself in the 2014, 2015, 2016 period, and then it spiked again in 2020, 2021. And so when Godersky mentions the Ferguson effect or the Floyd effect, he is, of course, correct. But CNN, whose job it is to cover these things, is bewildered. They have no idea what he's talking about. They literally claim that he's making it up.
The post-George Floyd riots resulted in an excess of over 15,000 black male deaths in this country. How?
Yeah.
The surge of violent crime, it was like Ferguson, the Ferguson effect and the Floyd effect.
Respectfully, you got to explain to me how George Floyd's death.
Yeah.
Because I need causation here.
Yes,
you really are
because what happens is after the Ferguson riot and after the Floyd riot, policemen, in fear of their jobs many times and political coverage, pull back from their jobs, resulting in an increased level of
listen,
homicide.
I got to stop you there because hold on.
You can look at the Washington Post.
Ryan, we got to stop you there because you're literally making a connection out of your own conjecture.
No,
you cannot.
It's a real thing.
That.
Look up the Ferguson effect. Look up the Floyd effect. It is a real term.
You cannot.
It's a real term. I didn't make this up.
Invent a connection between two things just because you want that connection to be there.
It's a little like a name. It's a real thing. You can look it up.
It doesn't mean it's right. I mean, this is CNN. Do you trust your media? Do you trust the FBI's statistics at this point? It's very difficult to figure out who the hell to trust, given the fact that everyone seems to be lying a lot of the time, or at least willfully ignorant about things a huge percentage of the time. So that crime talking point, I certainly hope that Kamala Harris is asked about that by Bret Baier on Fox News tonight. I'd love to hear her explain their amazing record on crime when the FBI is revising their violent crime statistics up in 2022. Really well done there, FBI. As always, doing an amazing job. Meanwhile, the difference between the lions and the scavengers on the economic front continues to be quite wide. I've talked about this model of thinking before. The lion is the person who wishes to be productive in American society, who utilizes private property and free markets in order to innovate and make life better for themselves and for everyone around them. And the scavengers are people who seek to tear down the system because they just believe that inequality of outcome is representative of a defect in the system. I have never seen, I think, quite this clear a contrast between the two parties on this matter as this year. Tim Walz, who is the weirdo vice presidential candidate that Kamala Harris picked in lieu of the popular Pennsylvania governor, because can't pick a Jew. Well, he did an event in Volant, Pennsylvania yesterday for rural voters. And he showed up looking like a stereotypical rural guy. He's wearing flannel and a hat, like one of the boys when he's not making jazz hands at them. And there he explained cogently his economic program, which amounts to me big stupid man no understand venture capital.
And Senator Vance, he became a media darling. He wrote a book about the place he grew up, but the premise was trashing that place where he grew up rather than lifting it up. This guy's a venture capitalist cosplaying like he's a cowboy or something. I don't even know what a venture capitalist does most of the time.
Okay, so there are so many things here. One, somebody who's a success story from rural Appalachia should be cheered for that. Tim Walz has a habit of tearing that down. It's the politics of envy. J.D. Vance made something of himself that didn't involve being a public school teacher and then a career government bureaucrat, which is what Tim Walz is. But beyond that latest statement, I don't understand what a venture capitalist does, then you shouldn't be the vice president of the United States. I would say that actually it's quite important to understand what a venture capitalist does in the United States if you wish to be at the top of the regulatory pyramid in the United States. For those who don't know, a venture capitalist is a person who invests in startup high-risk companies for a percentage of the company in order to generate the original capital necessary to start a company. That's what a venture capitalist does. They look at a series of possible investments. They analyze whether they think those investments are going to be good or not, and then they put money into companies. That's pretty damned important. If you say that you support startup businesses, venture capitalists are really, really important to that process. But he doesn't even understand what they do. Of course he doesn't. He doesn't own real estate. He doesn't own stock. This doof took a government salary and apparently shoved it in his mattress like a financial genius. And now he wants to run the American economy? Tim Walz? It's absolutely unbelievable that a person with this level of economic incoherence has somehow achieved the near pinnacle of American power. This is a country that was founded effectively as a commercial republic. And now we have morons who don't understand what a venture capitalist does running for vice president of the United States. Hats off to Tim Walz, man. The Charlie Brown of our era. Well, meanwhile, Donald Trump went into an unfriendly space. So it is funny. The entire left-wing media are claiming that Donald Trump is avoiding unfriendly interviews. He's only doing shows like this one, where obviously I'm a supporter of President Trump. Not true. So yesterday he went to Bloomberg and he did a pretty, I'd say, adversarial interview with the Bloomberg interviewer. The Bloomberg editor-in-chief actually began by saying, Kamala Harris was invited and she declined.
Just for the record and for those people watching on television, the Economic Club of Chicago and Bloomberg both invited Vice President Harris to a similar interview about her economic plans that she has declined so far.
There is a shocker. John Micklethwaite is the name of the editor-in-chief of Bloomberg News. He really does not like Donald Trump. He was very much against Donald Trump's proposals on, say, illegal immigration and on tariff policy. So here was Donald Trump explaining his immigration policy in a rather unfriendly environment.
I want a lot of people to come into our country, but I want them to come in legally. I don't want to have...
That means you will have to deport. You are talking about deporting 11 million people. That is a lot of people to take out.
It came out last week that 425,000 people are horrible criminals at the highest level, but it came out that 13,099 were let in during their administration. They tried to say longer, wrong. Over the last 3.5 years, 13,000 plus people came in, murderers. They're in jail for murder. Some were having the death penalty. They were all released into our country. Those people have to be returned. We can't live with thousands of murderers.
By the way, this is the person that Democrats are suggesting is senile because he danced at a rally. And then Donald Trump went after the Federal Reserve. And frankly, I found this amusing since I find the Federal Reserve to more generally be a negative to useless institution in American life, since I prefer gold standard. In any case, here was President Trump going after the Federal Reserve.
I think it's the greatest job in government. You show up to the office once a month and you say, let's see, flip a coin. And everybody talks about you like you're a god. Oh, what will he do? I mean, before, the guy used to walk into my office, he was like begging. Oh, he was fine.
But you did talk about you talked about removing him once.
I did, because he was keeping the rates too high.
Okay, so again, it is very funny how it is true that many of the economists, they treat the Federal Reserve as though it's some sort of Roman Vestal virgin who is going to read the auspices and explain exactly how the economy ought to work. Trump is not having any of that. He was asked about his policy. Many economists have suggested it will be inflationary. Now, let's be clear about this. A large-scale tariff across the board in the United States would inflate prices, because that's what tariffs do. What tariffs do is they bar foreign competition or tax foreign competition such that the prices in the United States to consumers rise. That is the natural effect of a tariff. There's no way around that. Whether that leads to the kind of inflation that Kamala Harris is talking about, that she's created with loose fiscal policy, blowing trillions of dollars into the economy, if the definition of inflation is too many dollars following too little product, tariffs create too little product by limiting competition. As a general rule, this is not totally anti-tariff. Some tariffs are necessary for security purposes, but what tariffs do is they limit the availability of product with the same number of dollars. That will have some inflationary effect. Will it have a massive inflationary effect? Probably not. It'll have some, but not massive. You know what has a massive inflationary effect? Spending trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars and then pumping money into the economy via the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. That's the point that Donald Trump was making about his inflation.
People are betting that your policies are going to drive up debt, they're going to drive up inflation, so they're going to drive up interest rates. Are the investors wrong?
Yeah, I had 4 years no inflation. I had 4 years no inflation.
But that was when you had much.
I had 4 years. It's better than that. And Biden, who has no idea where the hell he is, okay? Biden went 2 years with no inflation because he inherited from me. And then they started spending money like drunken sailors.
Again, what Trump is saying here is that you should trust his record and not always what he says, which, by the way, I think is a pretty good guide to Donald Trump as a politician. The reason that I'm voting for him and supporting him is because I liked what he did in his first term. Do I think that he's going to do everything he says he's going to do? Do I think that Donald Trump has the unilateral capacity as president of the United States to simply tariff at 10% every product coming from abroad? No, I don't. I don't see what authority he has as the executive branch leader to do that. You'd actually need an act of Congress to do some of those things. What I do know is that Donald Trump is extremely pragmatic about the economy. You know what he doesn't want? Inflation and higher prices. And if he tries something that doesn't work, you know what he's going to do? Reverse it. Because that's who Donald Trump is. Okay, in just a moment, we are going to get to the sad fate of Joe Biden. It is amazing. Nancy Pelosi, who's older than Joe Biden, shoved him out the door. And now she's saying, I haven't even talked to him lately. We'll get into that momentarily. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.
The question everyone in America is asking,
am I racist?
Make those moves. Get a Daily Wire Plus membership to see Am I Racist?
This is all I have. Did you want to?
I can help you guys out.
Yeah.
Go to amирacist.com and sign up now.
I've been told because I'm a white male, kind of at the top of the pile, how do I get down from the top?
I don't think you necessarily can.
How do we get past all the talk about racism?
We have to love each other.
Well, it can't be that simple. How do we get to a point of racial harmony? It's good to talk to you. Mm-hmm. We're still on a journey, all of us together.
I think you got some journeying to do.
Just talk to me about the statistics. We have an epidemic.
20 million crimes a year, 6,000, 7,000 hate crimes. No, there's no epidemic.
Why are we talking about statistics? This is not a matter of statistics.
Well, you asked me about the statistics.
Am I Racist? Coming to Daily Wire Plus on October 28th. Rated PG-13.